Beautiful native widow begged shelter for one night, but rancher gave her lifetime of protection. The cold wind howled across the vast empty plain as Tala walked, her feet heavy with each step, her heart even heavier. The sky above her was a dull gray, and the clouds seemed to stretch on forever, as if they too felt the weight of her sorrow. She had been walking for days now, never staying too long in one place, moving through the wilderness like a shadow, as if trying to outrun the memories that haunted her every step. The pain in her chest had become a constant companion, a reminder of the life she had lost, the life she had once known. Tala had been married to a strong, loving man, a man who had shared in the joys and struggles of life with her. Together they had built a small home in the hills, surrounded by the beauty of the land they both cherished. But that was before the fever had swept through her village, before it claimed the life of her beloved husband, leaving her alone in a world that suddenly felt much too large and much too cold. Since that fateful day, Tala had wandered, not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do. Her heart had been shattered, and with it the dreams she had once shared with her husband. Now, with only the clothes on her back and a small bundle of belongings, she had nowhere to turn. She knew the world was a dangerous place for someone like her, a woman, alone, far from the safety of her people. Her survival had depended on her ability to move quietly, to stay out of sight. But as the days stretched into weeks, she began to feel the weight of isolation settling in her bones. The land she once loved now felt alien, a place of uncertainty and loss. Tala had no choice but to keep going, to keep searching for something, though she wasn't sure what. A place to rest, a place to heal, a place to belong. Her feet, wrapped in worn leather, ached as she moved through the tall grass. Her stomach growled with hunger, but she had learned long ago to ignore it. It was a part of the journey now, something she had grown used to. She had hunted for food when she could, and when she couldn't, she relied on the kindness of strangers. But kindness had become a rare thing, and Tala knew she couldn't rely on it forever. She had no choice but to keep moving, to keep going forward, no matter how much her body protested. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Tala knew she needed shelter. The night in these parts could be brutal, especially for someone unprepared. She had been in the wilderness long enough to know the dangers of a cold night, wild animals, the biting chill that could freeze a person's bones, and the ever-present threat of starvation. She had to find shelter. She couldn't afford to risk spending another night out in the open. Her eyes scanned the horizon, and then, like a beacon in the distance, she saw it. A large ranch. Smoke curled from a chimney, and the soft glow of light from a window promised warmth, safety, and perhaps the chance for a meal. Tala felt a flicker of hope in her chest, something she hadn't felt in days. She didn't know who lived there or what kind of people they were, but at this point she had little choice. She had to ask for help. Tala approached the ranch slowly, her heart racing with a mix of hope and uncertainty. She wasn't used to asking for anything, especially not from strangers. But the need for shelter, for safety, was overwhelming. She stepped up to the front door and hesitated for a moment. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door. But before she could knock, the door swung open, revealing a tall man standing in the doorway. The man, with his rough-hewn features and strong build, seemed surprised to see her. His dark eyes studied her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. His face was weathered from years of hard work, but there was something kind in the way he looked at her. Tala opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She hadn't expected him to open the door so quickly, and now, standing there, she wasn't sure what to say. She had come all this way, only to find herself unsure of what to ask for. The rancher, sensing her hesitation, spoke first. "You look like you could use a place to rest," he said in a voice that was deep but not unkind. "You're welcome to stay for the night, but you'll have to make your way in the morning. It's not safe out here after dark." Tala nodded gratefully, too exhausted to argue. "Just for the night," she said softly. "I won't stay longer." He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Come on in," he said. "You can warm up by the fire." Tala stepped into the warmth of the house, grateful for the shelter. The room was modest but comfortable. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a soft glow over the space. A table with a few chairs, a bed in the corner, and a few simple furnishings gave the room a feeling of home. Tala's eyes lingered on the fire for a moment before she finally allowed herself to relax. It had been so long since she had felt warmth. Real warmth, not just the heat of a campfire. Her body, stiff from days of walking, began to thaw, and she could feel her muscles unwind for the first time in what seemed like forever. The rancher motioned toward a chair by the fire. "Sit," he said. "You look like you could use a meal. I'll get something started for you." Tala sat down, the chair creaking beneath her, and watched as the man went to work in the small kitchen area. She felt her stomach growl again, louder this time, as the smell of something cooking filled the room. It had been too long since she had eaten anything substantial, and the scent of food made her mouth water. After a few moments he returned with a bowl of warm stew, the rich scent of meat and vegetables filling the air. "Here," he said, handing her the bowl. "It's not much, but it'll keep you from starving." Tala took the bowl, her hands trembling slightly as she held it. She looked up at him, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know where else to go." The rancher nodded, but there was something in his gaze, a softness that had not been there before. "You don't have to explain," he said. "You're welcome here." Tala ate in silence, savoring the warmth of the food and the quiet peace of the moment. She had never imagined that a stranger would offer her such kindness, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear and sadness. She felt safe. As she finished the meal, the rancher spoke again. "You can sleep here tonight," he said. "In the morning you can decide where you want to go, but tonight you'll be safe." Tala nodded, grateful beyond words. She had expected nothing from this encounter, but here she was, offered more than she could have ever hoped for. She knew that she would have to leave in the morning, to continue her journey alone, but for tonight she could rest, and for tonight that was enough. As she lay down by the fire, the warmth wrapping around her like a protective embrace, Tala closed her eyes. The sound of the wind outside faded into the background, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to sleep without fear. Tomorrow would come, and with it, more uncertainty. But for now, she was safe. For one night she was free of the weight of the world. The fire crackled softly in the hearth as the first light of dawn crept through the window. Tala awoke, the warmth of the flames still lingering on her skin. For a brief moment she forgot where she was. The pain of her loss, the burden of her journey, felt distant in that quiet, peaceful space. She lay still, listening to the sounds of the ranch around her, the low murmur of the wind outside, the creaking of the wooden beams, and the soft sounds of footsteps approaching. Jonas, the rancher, had already risen. His presence was familiar now, though still a little unexpected. Tala had spent the night in a stranger's home, a man who had shown kindness when she had no one else to turn to. She hadn't expected much. A bed, a meal, a warm place to rest. Those were all gifts she could never have imagined receiving from someone she didn't know. But in the quiet hours of the night as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, she had come to realize that his offer of shelter wasn't just kindness. It was something more. As the sun rose higher, Tala felt the warmth of the morning light spill over her. She stretched her legs slowly, feeling the ache of walking for days without rest. Despite the comforts of the bed, her body still ached from the long journey. Yet there was something different in the air now. She felt a small sense of peace, a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Her eyes drifted to the window again, where the morning sky was painted in soft hues of pink and orange. The land outside was vast, stretching beyond what she could see, but it felt less intimidating now, less lonely. Jonas had already prepared breakfast, a simple meal of bread and eggs, but it was more than enough. Tala joined him at the small wooden table. She noticed the quiet way he worked, how his hands moved with purpose, yet there was a gentleness in the way he handled each task. He didn't speak much, but his presence was comforting. There was something reassuring about him, something that made her feel safe in a world that had offered her so little of that. As she sat across from him, the silence between them felt natural. She had never been good at speaking to strangers, and with her heart heavy from grief, words seemed to fail her more often than not. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. There was no need for unnecessary conversation. They both understood the weight of unspoken things. After they had eaten, Jonas cleared the table and began to prepare for the day's work. He glanced at Tala, his dark eyes thoughtful. "You're welcome to stay for a while," he said, his voice calm but direct. "But I understand if you need to keep moving." Tala nodded, unsure of what to say. She didn't want to impose. She had no intention of staying for long, not wanting to take advantage of his kindness. "I don't know what I'll do," she replied quietly. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Jonas paused, his brow furrowed in thought. He seemed to consider her words carefully, then finally spoke again, his tone a little softer. "You can stay here for as long as you need. I have plenty of work to do, and I could use some help, if you're willing." The offer caught Tala off guard. She had expected him to want her to leave after a night's shelter, to be grateful and move on. But instead, he was offering her something she hadn't expected, a chance to be part of something, even if just for a short while. She hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Her pride had always made her wary of accepting help, but this was different. It wasn't charity, it was an invitation, and she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a place here, even if only for a little while. "I don't want to be a burden," she said softly, looking down at her hands. She wasn't used to relying on anyone, but the idea of staying in one place, of finding some stability, was tempting. Her life had been nothing but wandering, nothing but uncertainty. It was hard to imagine what it might be like to stop, even for a moment. Jonas gave a small, understanding smile. "You're not a burden I wouldn't offer if I didn't mean it." His words made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Trust. She wasn't sure she fully trusted him yet, but his words felt genuine. The loneliness that had been her constant companion began to ease just a little, replaced by a small glimmer of connection.
"I'll help," she said quietly.
"I can work. I'm not afraid of hard work." Jonas nodded approvingly. "Good. I could use an extra pair of hands. We'll start with the chores around here. There's plenty to do." And so, Tala spent the next few hours helping Jonas with the work around the ranch. They began with the horses, brushing their coats and feeding them, then moved on to the barn, where they gathered firewood and tended to the animals. Despite herself, Tala found herself enjoying the work. It was simple, physical work, the kind that allowed her to clear her mind. She didn't have to think about the past, about the loss she carried with her. She only had to focus on the task at hand, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her mind felt still. Jonas worked beside her, occasionally offering quiet instructions or words of encouragement. His presence was steady, and though he didn't talk much, his actions spoke volumes. Tala appreciated the quiet, the calm of the day. She had grown used to the noise of her thoughts, to the endless questions that swirled in her mind. But here, there was peace in the simplicity of the work, in the rhythm of each task. As the day wore on, they took a break for lunch, sitting outside on the porch in the warmth of the midday sun. Tala had never been one for idle conversation, but there was something about Jonas that made her feel comfortable, even in silence. She could sense that he, too, was content to just be. They sat together watching the horses graze in the field and the birds flit about the trees. Tala found herself thinking about the life she had left behind, the life that seemed so far away now. She had once been part of a community, part of something larger than herself. But that world had been torn away from her, and now she was left to wander. She had never imagined she would find a place like this, so different from the world she had known, yet somehow comforting. Jonas broke the silence after a while. "You've been through a lot," he said quietly. It wasn't a question, just an observation. Tala met his gaze, surprised by his insight. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I can see it in your eyes." Tala hesitated. She wasn't ready to share everything, not yet. But there was something about Jonas's presence, something steady and unyielding, that made her want to open up. She swallowed hard, pushing back the lump in her throat. "I lost my husband," she said softly. "The fever took him, and I haven't known where to go since." Jonas nodded, his expression softening. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said simply. His words weren't full of pity or sympathy, but they were full of understanding. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her feel like she wasn't completely alone. "I don't know what to do now," she admitted. "Everything feels so empty." Jonas didn't offer a solution. Instead, he just sat with her, his presence a quiet comfort. He didn't try to fix her or make her feel better. He simply gave her space to be, to feel what she needed to feel. For the rest of the day, they continued their work in silence, a comfortable, easy silence that allowed Tala to process her thoughts. When the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the land, Tala felt something stir inside her. It wasn't a sudden change or a dramatic shift, but it was there. A small sense of hope, of possibility. Maybe this place, this ranch, wasn't just a temporary stop. Maybe, just maybe, it could be the beginning of something new. As she sat down to dinner that evening, she realized that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about running anymore. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about leaving. She was just here. And for now, that was enough. The days that followed felt different for Tala. For the first time in what seemed like forever, she didn't feel like she was simply surviving. She wasn't running from one place to another, never staying long enough to feel the earth beneath her feet. Here, on the ranch with Jonas, she had found something she hadn't known she was searching for. Peace. The work was hard, but it gave her a purpose each day. The ranch was alive with the sounds of animals, the hum of life, and every morning she woke to the smell of fresh bread baking, the warmth of a fire crackling in the hearth, and the steady rhythm of Jonas working beside her. At first, she had hesitated to truly let herself settle in. The fear of attachment, of becoming dependent, had held her back. But as each day passed, that fear began to fade. She was no longer a stranger in a strange place. She was a part of something, even if just for a little while. The ranch, the land, and Jonas himself had become familiar, a new kind of home she hadn't expected. Every chore, every meal they shared, every moment they worked side by side made the place feel more like hers. Jonas didn't ask many questions about her past, but that didn't stop Tala from thinking about it. She had always believed that the past would follow her wherever she went, that the pain, the loss, would be too heavy to carry forward. But here, in the stillness of the ranch, she found moments of relief from that weight. The world outside felt far away. There were no reminders of what she had lost, no familiar faces to bring the sorrow of her memories rushing back. It was just the land, the animals, and Jonas. Quiet, steady, and reliable. One afternoon, as they worked in the fields together, the sun high above them, Jonas turned to her with a thoughtful expression. He had been unusually quiet that morning, absorbed in his own thoughts as they worked side by side, yet now there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. "You've been here for a while now," Jonas said, his voice breaking the silence. "How do you feel about staying longer?" Tala paused for a moment, surprised by the question. She hadn't thought about it much, but the truth was that the thought had crossed her mind. Every day, she felt more rooted in this place. The sense of purpose she had felt when she first arrived had grown stronger. Yet, she had always known that there would come a time when she would need to move on. She wasn't the kind of person who could stay in one place forever, could she? I've been thinking about it," Tala said quietly, looking down at her hands, dirty from the day's work. "But I don't want to overstay my welcome. I don't want to be a burden." Jonas looked at her, his expression unreadable, before he spoke again. "You're not a burden. You've helped around here more than I could have expected. You've become part of the routine, part of the land. His words meant more to her than she could express. It wasn't just about the work or the chores. It was about the fact that she was wanted here. It was about being seen, being valued for more than just what she could offer. Jonas hadn't made her feel like an outsider. From the very beginning, he had treated her like someone who belonged, even if only for a short time. Tala felt a lump in her throat as she met his gaze. There was something in his eyes, something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity or sympathy. It was something else, something deeper. He didn't just offer her protection or shelter. He had shown her something she hadn't expected: respect. In a world that had offered her little of that, it felt like a lifeline. "I've always been on my own," Tala said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I never really knew what it was like to be part of something. I don't know how to accept it." Jonas didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the hoe, his hands moving as naturally as they had all day. But his words, when they came, were calm, steady. "There's no need to know everything," he said. "Sometimes you just have to take things one step at a time." Those words lingered in the air, more meaningful than any grand statement. Tala didn't respond, but she felt a sense of understanding settle in her chest. She didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to know everything. For once, it was enough to just be. To live each day without the constant pressure of what had come before, without the weight of what was yet to come. The next few weeks passed in a comfortable routine. Jonas and Tala worked together every morning, tended to the animals, repaired fences, and gathered firewood. They ate meals together, sitting across from one another at the small table by the window, the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. Though there were moments of silence between them, it was never awkward. It was a shared silence, the kind that spoke of mutual understanding. Tala began to feel a sense of belonging that she hadn't known in a long time. Jonas never pushed her to speak about her past, but he was always there when she needed him. Sometimes when the day's work was done, they would sit outside and watch the stars, the night air cool and still around them. It was during those moments that Tala began to notice the subtle changes in herself. The grief that had once consumed her seemed less overwhelming. The loneliness, though never fully gone, felt quieter now. She was no longer lost in the sea of memories that had threatened to drown her. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of it. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Jonas turned to her with a question she hadn't expected. "Do you ever think about going back to your people?" he asked, his voice soft but curious. Tala's heart skipped a beat at the question. It was a question she had asked herself many times, but the answer was always the same. She had no place to return to, not after everything that had happened. Her people were scattered, lost to the same violence and sickness that had taken her husband. Her village was no more, and the thought of returning to a life that no longer existed felt impossible. "I don't know," she said, her voice quiet, the weight of the words heavy in the air. "I don't think I could go back. It's not the same anymore." Jonas nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she had expected. "Sometimes it's not about going back," he said. "It's about moving forward." The simplicity of his words struck her. It wasn't about what she had lost or what she couldn't change. It was about finding something new, something that could bring meaning to her life once more. The past, while it had shaped her, didn't have to define her. The future was still open, still unwritten. "I never thought I'd find peace again," Tala said quietly, her eyes meeting his. "But here, with you, I think I've found a piece of it." Jonas gave her a small, quiet smile. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "Not as long as you're here." The sincerity in his voice made something inside her stir. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that it was possible to find a new beginning. Maybe she didn't have to keep running, keep searching for something that could never be found. Maybe, for once, she could let herself stay. As the days passed, Tala began to let go of the fear that had clung to her for so long. She wasn't the same person who had walked onto the ranch that cold evening, the woman who had been lost and broken. She was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone who could stand on her own, yet, for the first time, didn't have to do it alone. She wasn't sure what the future held, But for the first time in a long while, she was ready to face it, one step at a time. As the seasons slowly shifted, so did the landscape of Tala's life. What had started as a simple act of kindness, a night's shelter, a warm meal, had slowly grown into something deeper, something neither she nor Jonas had expected. Tala had never imagined that she could find peace, not after everything she had been through. The grief, the loss, and the loneliness that had once defined her every step seemed to dissolve in the quiet routine of the ranch. Every morning the sun would rise over the horizon, painting the sky in warm hues of gold and pink. The animals would stir, the horses neighing softly as they shuffled about in their stalls, and the rooster's crow would echo across the fields. By the time the first light touched the land, Jonas and Tala would already be up, preparing for the day ahead. The work had become familiar. The daily chores, the feeding, the cleaning, the mending, were no longer burdens. They were part of the rhythm of life on the ranch, a rhythm that felt, for the first time in years, natural. Tala had come to know every inch of the land. She had learned how to care for the animals, how to mend the fences, and how to grow the crops that fed them both. The work was hard, but it gave her a sense of purpose, something she hadn't known in a long time. And over time, it became clear to her that this place, this ranch, wasn't just a temporary stop. It was a place where she could truly rebuild, not just her life, but herself. Jonas, too, had changed in these months. At first, he had been quiet, reserved, a man accustomed to solitude. But now, there was a warmth in his presence, a quiet strength that drew her in. They didn't talk much, but when they did, it was always meaningful. His words, though few, always seemed to carry weight, and his actions spoke louder than anything else. He had shown her what it meant to live with purpose, to care for something beyond yourself. He had shown her that kindness didn't always have to come with an expectation of return. One morning, as the sun rose higher in the sky and the smell of fresh bread filled the air, Jonas paused in the middle of his work and turned to Tala with a look she had come to recognize. It was a look that held unspoken questions, an invitation to something more, something deeper. "You've been here a while now," he said, his voice steady but carrying a hint of something else. "How do you feel about staying longer?" Tala wiped her brow, her hand lingering on the handle of the rake. She hadn't expected him to ask. It wasn't a question she had thought about in such simple terms. She had come here to escape, to find a place where she could breathe again. But now the thought of leaving felt foreign. The land, the work, and most of all, Jonas. Everything had become a part of her now, something she wasn't sure she could let go of. I've been thinking about it," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. But here, it feels like something's changed. I don't know if it's a permanent change, but I don't feel so lost anymore." Jonas nodded, his gaze steady on her. There was a slight smile on his lips, but it wasn't the kind of smile that was meant to ease tension. It was the kind of smile that came with understanding, with acceptance. "You don't have to leave," he said simply. "You don't have to go anywhere." His words hung in the air between them, and Tala felt a flood of emotions wash over her. She had spent so long running, so long feeling like there was no place for her, that the idea of staying, of truly staying, was both comforting and terrifying. Could she really put down roots? Could she really let herself belong? For so long she had defined herself by her pain, by the loss she had suffered. It was all she had known. The idea of finding something new, something whole, was foreign. She had never thought she would find a place to call home again. But here, in this quiet corner of the world, it felt possible. "I don't want to be a burden," Tala said quietly, her voice tinged with doubt. "You've already given me so much. I don't want to take more than what's fair." Jonas shook his head. "You're not a burden. You're a part of this place now, Tala, part of this land, and no one's asking you to do anything more than be here, to stay. The rest, well, we'll figure that out together." There was something in his voice, something in the way he spoke, that made Tala believe him. It wasn't just about the ranch, about the work or the land. It was about something deeper. It was about the space they had created together, a space where they could both be themselves, without fear of judgment. In that moment, Tala realized that this place wasn't just a refuge, it was a home. And, more than that, it was a chance to build something that was truly hers, not just in the sense of ownership, but in the sense of belonging.
"I think I would like to stay," Tala said, her voice more certain than it had been in days.
"I think I'm ready." Jonas smiled at her, the warmth of it reaching his eyes. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "There's plenty of work to do, but there's no rush. We'll take it one day at a time." And so, day by day, Tala settled into the rhythm of life on the ranch. She worked with Jonas side by side, learning more about the land, about herself, and about the quiet kind of love that didn't need words to be understood. As the months passed, she became more confident, more sure of herself. The loneliness that had once defined her life began to fade into the background, replaced by something new, a sense of peace, a sense of purpose. One afternoon, as the wind picked up and the sky turned a darker shade of blue, Jonas came to her with something unexpected, a small bundle wrapped in cloth.
"I thought you might want to see this,"
he said, his tone soft. A gift of sorts. Tala raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. She unwrapped the bundle carefully, revealing a small, delicate plant. It was a sapling, green and full of life, its leaves still tender but strong. "It's a cedar tree," Jonas said, his voice steady. "I thought it might be nice to plant something together, something that'll grow and last." Tala stared at the sapling, her heart swelling with emotion. She hadn't expected something so simple, yet so meaningful. A tree, a life that would grow alongside hers, alongside Jonas's.
I don't know what to say," she whispered, the words caught in her throat. "It's perfect."
Jonas smiled, his eyes softening. "It's just a start," he said. "A small thing, but it's ours, and it'll grow with us." Together they planted the tree near the edge of the ranch, where the land sloped gently downward, the soil rich and dark beneath their hands. As they worked, Tala felt a sense of hope stir inside her. A quiet, steady hope. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she didn't feel the need to rush toward it. She was ready to take things one day at a time, just as Jonas had suggested. The tree grew with them, just as their lives began to grow together. Every day brought new challenges, new lessons, but it also brought new moments of peace, new moments of understanding. Together, Jonas and Tala had built something more than just a home. They had built a life, one that was grounded in the quiet strength of the land, the work they did, and the bond they shared. And as the years passed, the cedar tree stood tall and strong, a living testament to the journey they had taken together. From that first night of shelter to the quiet days spent on the ranch, they had found something that was more than just survival. They had found life. Years passed and the seasons continued their timeless cycle. Spring turned to summer, then fall, and then winter again, each one bringing its own rhythm to the ranch. In the quiet of the land where time seemed to stretch out endlessly, Tala and Jonas had found a sense of peace neither of them had ever known. The ranch had become their world, a world they had built together from the ground up. What once was a place of solitude and hard work had transformed into a home, a place where love grew, not in grand gestures, but in small, everyday moments. Tala had never imagined that she could feel such a deep connection to the land. When she had first arrived at the ranch, she had been running, trying to escape a life that had been ripped apart by grief. She had thought that her heart would never heal, that the pain would always define her. But here, among the horses and the fields and the trees, she had discovered something different, something more enduring than the sorrow she had carried for so long. Every day brought new challenges. Sometimes the weather was harsh, the crops failed, or the animals needed extra care. But they faced it all together. It was hard work, but it was honest, and in that honesty, there was a comfort. The land gave as much as it took, and with each passing year, Tala became more in tune with it. She knew the soil, the rhythms of the seasons, and the language of the animals. Her hands, once soft and unused to physical labor, had become strong, calloused by years of tending to the ranch. Jonas, too, had changed. The quiet, solitary man who had first opened his door to her had grown into someone who could share his thoughts and feelings without hesitation. The walls he had built around himself had slowly crumbled, not because he was weak, but because he had learned that he didn't have to bear everything alone. Together, they had become a team, not just in work, but in life. They had learned to depend on each other, to support each other, and to celebrate the small victories that came with each day. One morning after a long winter that had left the land covered in a blanket of snow, Tala stood by the window, looking out over the fields. The sun was rising, casting a soft golden light across the land, and in the distance the cedar tree they had planted all those years ago stood tall and strong, its branches reaching up toward the sky. The tree had grown with them, just as they had grown together. It had been small once, just a fragile sapling, but now it was a symbol of their journey. A symbol of their shared strength, their commitment, and the life they had built. Tala smiled as she looked at it, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. She and Jonas had come a long way since that first night when she had arrived, weary and lost, seeking nothing more than shelter for a single night. Jonas joined her by the window, his hand resting on her shoulder as he looked out at the same tree. "It's grown a lot, hasn't it?" he said, his voice quiet but full of meaning. Tala nodded, her gaze fixed on the tree. "It has, just like we have." Jonas smiled softly, his eyes meeting hers.
"I never thought I'd have something like this," he said. "A home, a family."
"I never thought I'd find someone to share it with." Tala reached out and took his hand, the warmth of his touch grounding her in the moment.
"I never thought I'd find a place like this," she said.
"A place where I could truly be myself. A place where I could let go of the past and build something new." They stood there in silence for a few moments, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, feeling the warmth of the day beginning to take hold. There was no need for words now. They had both come to understand that the silence between them was as comforting as anything they had said to each other. It was the silence of two people who had lived through hardship, who had built something together from nothing, and who now, in this quiet moment, were simply content to be. As the years went on, their bond only deepened. They had built a life together, not just out of necessity but out of choice. The love they shared was simple and steady, grounded in the same soil that nourished the crops and the animals. It wasn't a love that needed grand declarations or dramatic moments. It was a love that grew quietly, steadily, day by day. They worked together side by side, as they had always done. There were still challenges, there always would be, but they faced them with a sense of shared purpose. Jonas taught Tala how to repair the fences when the wind had blown them down, and Tala taught Jonas how to plant the crops in the spring, ensuring they would grow strong. They were a team, in every sense of the word, and as the years went by they began to dream of a future that wasn't just about survival, but about living. One evening, as they sat on the porch after a long day of work, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Tala turned to Jonas with a thoughtful expression. The world around them was quiet, the only sound the gentle rustling of the trees in the breeze. The ranch was peaceful, and for the first time Tala felt a deep sense of belonging. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft but steady, "about what we've built here. About this place, and about what comes next." Jonas looked at her, his expression curious. "What do you mean?"
Tala took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling in her chest.
"I never thought I could have a future, not after everything that happened. But now here, with you, I think there's more for us. I think we can grow this place even more. We can make it something even bigger, something we can leave behind, something that can last."
Jonas smiled at her, his eyes filled with pride.
"You've always been a dreamer, Tala," he said, his voice full of affection. "I think you're right. We built something good here, and we can keep building." Together they had created a life that was more than just survival. It was a life that had meaning, a life that was full of love, hard work, and purpose. And as the years passed, they began to see that their dream, their vision for the future, wasn't just about what they could create with their hands. It was about what they could leave behind for those who would come after them. And so they continued to work, to build, to grow. The ranch flourished, becoming not just a place of work, but a place of hope and opportunity. They taught others the skills they had learned, passing down the knowledge of the land, of survival, and of the quiet strength that came with it. Their story became a part of the ranch's history, a story of resilience, of love, and of the power of building something from the ground up. Tala and Jonas had found something together that neither of them had ever expected, a life that was full of meaning, full of love, and full of possibility. They had built a home not just for themselves, but for anyone who needed a place to find peace, to heal, and to grow. And as they stood together, watching the cedar tree they had planted all those years ago, they knew that their journey was far from over. The future was still unwritten, but whatever came next, they would face it together, with the same quiet strength that had carried them through the years.